We're going to move to item C1. It's ZZ 2021-01, ordinance number 3698. It's a public hearing, so I'm opening the public hearing for ordinance number 3698, and I'm going to call on Clayton Comstock to introduce this item. Clayton.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Item C1 on your agenda is a request by the John R. McAdams Company for a zoning change from agricultural, to RPD residential plan development. This is on 3.5 acres located at 8337 Davis Boulevard. See the property highlighted there on your screen with the green star. It's kind of near the southwest quadrant of North Tarrant Parkway and Davis Boulevard. Let me zoom in a little bit further. You can see that it's just to the south of the shopping center that includes the Gentry Coffee, Sonic, and some other businesses there just to the north. And then the Saddlebrook Estates residential neighborhood just to the west as well. Across Davis Boulevard, you'll see the Alamo Draft House building, which will be opening shortly in July, I believe. And then you can see the driveway for Alamo Draft House coming out to there, to Davis Boulevard. Number of photographs of the property. This is a view from Davis Boulevard at the southwest corner of the 9-acre tract. It's a total of 9 acres undeveloped or underdeveloped tract, 3.5 of which are under consideration this evening for the zoning change. So this is at the far southeast corner of the property across Davis Boulevard looking onto it. You can see the Saddlebrook Estates neighborhood there in the background. Moving a little bit further north along Davis Boulevard, this is taken at the Alamo Draft House driveway, looking across Davis Boulevard at the property. And then also taken on site at the commercial shopping center looking south, because a number of these trees would actually be removed as part of the development, and then the actual development would also be visible here from this parking lot. This is also along that commercial development to the north, along that property line there between the subject property and the commercial development. And again, these trees would all be removed as part of the proposal. Of course, there will be trees put in its place, and we'll go over that in more detail during the presentations. And then final picture from the commercial shopping center on the north side, looking south. This is at the far northwest corner of the subject tract. So this is the corner here of the property that's adjacent. A couple of photos from the neighboring Saddlebrook Estates neighborhood. So this is at the end of the street looking east at the current terminus of that street, Clara Drive. And just a little bit closer to that current barricade. There's a view along the western property line of the subject tract, again, eastern project line of Saddlebrook Estates. See the drainage flume there between the two properties and the existing fence line. That will be important as we talk about the proposed fencing as we get through the presentation. And that same fence line, just the previous shot was from Bridle Path Lane. This was from Clara Drive. And then one last shot looking back towards Davis Boulevard, we can see the Alamo Draft House there in the background. This also shows the elevation change of the property, where Davis Boulevard is slightly above the finished floor or the finished grade of Clara Drive. The future land use plan does recommend retail commercial on the entire 9-acre site, including the 3.5 acres before this evening. The retail commercial designation provides for sites for community and regional shopping centers, commercial establishments, and employment centers typically located on major thoroughfares and at key intersections. The existing zoning of the property, as I mentioned, is agricultural, and what's being requested here this evening is the residential plan development zoning district. With that said, I'm going to turn over to the applicant, and I'll be back up afterwards with P&Z's recommendation and staff report.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, Shane Wright with Real Estate Equities Development Company. We're the developer for the Village Cooperative application before you tonight, 1400 Corporate Center Curve, Suite 100, Eagan, Minnesota, 55121. Most of you are familiar with our product type. So the focus of tonight's going to be predominantly on the site plan, details of the site plan, your questions on that. I do have a lot more information if for anyone that has questions on our product type and who we're attracting to our community. So with that, I'll jump right in. Appreciate you taking the time to hear us tonight. Go the other way. So we're going to do a quick introduction into the Village Cooperative, and then we'll go right into the site plan details and elevations for the building. Our zoning request and details, building and site plan details. We want to address all the concerns with solutions, and I want to talk through that with you all tonight. We had a neighborhood meeting a couple of months ago. We had about 35 to 40 neighbors attend. We took the feedback from the neighbors, followed up with calls to the neighbors to make sure we were addressing any possible concern that we could do and address. So we're going to go over that with you tonight. And the goal is to demonstrate City Council tonight how this project is needed. We believe it's the best option for the site. I couldn't emphasize that enough. The city and the neighborhood long term. So we're going to cover why we think that's the case. And then we respectfully request if there's any questions whatsoever, please give us the opportunity to answer those questions. We spend a significant amount of time with the neighbors and with our team to bring this opportunity here. And we're choosing North Richland Hills as our first community in the state of Texas. So we're excited to get the opportunity to come here. Our company, we're a Twin City based company. Some of you remember, I went to school here. I grew up in Kansas, met my wife, and we moved to Minnesota 18 years ago. And I started with this company right when we moved to Minnesota. So I've always had an eye on coming here. Our firm specializes in senior cooperative housing. And we've been in business since 1972. We started doing cooperatives just over 18 years ago. We have 40 village cooperatives that are open, under construction, or being planned right now. It's actually, we just opened our 30th building last Friday in Centennial, Colorado. We've completed around $450 million of cooperative development. It's the only type of residential development we do at this point in our company. We've got, I need to update this, but we have 30 open communities in 10 states. And it's predominantly been in the Midwest. And we did a national market study a couple of years ago. And we did an analysis of basically about 2,100 towns in America. And this location within not just North Richland Hills, but this location within North Richland Hills fits into the top 1% of our national market study. And the number one overriding theme here is you have a significant, it's 15,000 households, 62 and over, within a 3-mile radius. And they've been in their homes 20 plus years, a big portion of that. In Colorado, they haven't. They've been in their homes 8 to 15 years. And I don't know if I've seen people with this much longevity in a home since rural farm towns in Iowa. And it's kind of unusual. And it tells me that not only are people looking for a place that they want to live long term, they haven't found the place, but I also think it says that you're going to have more proposals before you in the future. It's a number that you can't dismiss. And it was an easy decision for us to come here. We also did our research, and we know you guys are careful about selecting what comes here. I think that adds to the value of living here and why there's so many people have been here 20, 25, 30 years. So facts about the site. Clayton touched on it, but this site is zoned agricultural. So whatever comes into this site is going to have to be rezoned. Long-term plan calls for retail, but anything that comes in here would be a rezoning. Our proposal is on 3.5 acres. Total acreage on this site is 8.33 acres. So we'd be in the northwest corner of that location. 2030 the Vision Land Use Plan is a guide map for the range of uses. Y'all are totally familiar. I know you spent a lot of time on we don't need to rehash your 2030 land use plan. But the retail commercials, obviously, as you know, are going to have a really high impact on the site. A lot higher traffic, a lot higher signage, parking, less landscaping, tighter setback. So everybody knows that. And so we wanted to find a location that was a blend of still being able to do that and have a transitional use like ours that would be an amenity to the area. So the senior cooperative has the lowest possible impact on a site in comparison to any other uses, not just for traffic, but the minimal number of homes we're looking at doing here. 55 homes is a very small number of homes compared to how many people are going to need or want homes. We do it on purpose. All of our projects are between 49 and 74 homes. The reason we do that is because it does become a long-term extended family for the owners, and because they're owners, they don't move very often, so they're going to stay there long-term. So keeping it smaller is better long-term for the ownership. It's also better for management and for the surrounding properties. It'll allow this area to develop with retail, commercial, envisioned along Davis. I think our development will help spur that, if anything. The seller for this property wasn't considering selling it. It had been in his family forever. I think he found a letter where his family came from Georgia on horseback to get to this property. He knows the history better than I do, and I want to learn more about this history. But it's been in his family forever, and we were able to work out to where we could take a portion of this property and leave the front for future retail along Davis. The growing demand for senior housing in this area, it's eye-popping. I look at 600 sites a year, and there's not many I ever see with more people than this one in close proximity. And I'm including urban sites that I see all the time sent our way. So the building sits on the property. You probably have reviewed some of the paperwork in advance of the meeting tonight. This is meant to show you a landscape vision for the property. We've done a landscape plan for the property. If you're familiar with us, you'll know that because we put the parking beneath, we're able to landscape more of the property. We spend significant amount of time on the landscape plan, and most of you know within an acre there's 43,560 square feet. We're taking about 30,000 of that and putting it underneath in the parking. So taking that 30,000 square feet that you would put on the surface and landscaping it not only is great for the project, but it's great for the surrounding properties. I'm sure there'll be questions on landscaping. We'll get into those details. We've got McAdams here, our local civil engineer. Justin Lansdowne, Kara King are here with McAdams if you have any specific questions about the landscape portion of it. But just a couple of facts on it. We worked with the city to come up with the mix of plantings and trees, the appropriate mix, the mix that works here. This is not a Minnesota company determining your landscaping. We're using local knowledge for that. We wouldn't pretend to know that here locally. The landscaping requirements for the site are 15% of the total site size, which is about 0.517 acres if you take the total square footage of the property. We're proposing 41% of the property, 1.43 acres. So that's about 2.77 times the required minimum. We're able to do that for a number of different reasons. Number one, we got a site big enough to do that. Number two, we're putting the parking beneath. And then we've enhanced the landscaping buffer along the western property line. There's a number of things and details tonight that the feedback from the neighbors were the direct reflection of what we're putting into this plan for you tonight. If we didn't have the parking beneath or we were a two-story building, we'd come nowhere close to these numbers. We also wouldn't be able to have the setbacks we do. We have a significant setback on the west, 121 feet, and it's because of the design of the building and putting the parking beneath. If we were a commercial use, it'd be challenging to meet the landscaping requirements as you see commercial uses come before you. You've been through it a million times where hitting the landscape requirements can be challenging sometimes on a commercial use. So we have the advantage of being able to supersede that. So I thought this would be helpful to give you a bird's eye view of how the building sits on the property and the access. We've met with on the phone Texas Department of Transportation to get the approval to have the access across from Alamo Draft House. Their feedback on that was, we'll give you okay to do that, even though it's a little bit, they would probably prefer it a little bit further to the south. However, it makes no sense to not line up with Alamo Draft House's drive. In return, they would like to not have a second access along Davis. And to us, that does not matter, but it has to work for you all, has to work for the seller. And so we went to the seller and said they're only going to grant 1 point of access, and you need to be okay with that. And the seller is fine with that. He's acknowledged that, and he'll acknowledge that in writing if that is deemed necessary. This has a lot. This is just to give you a site plan. We're not going to go through all these details here. This is just to give you how the building lays out. Parking is on the east and the west. For the extra parking, there's a parking study included with the submittal tonight. I don't know if you had a chance to see that or not. The parking study is based on all of our other projects, and it's an example of parking studies that we are accustomed to doing for other towns. There is not you don't have a senior housing zoning designation in your code. So we typically will fall into some kind of a multifamily designation, which will typically have very high parking requirements. Since we get about 55% couples and 45% singles, and we manage 30 communities, we see firsthand how many parking spaces are used. So we provided a copy of that for you tonight. We typically, on this size of a building, will use about 9 to 11 spaces on the outside. I believe we're providing 27, plus the parking on the underneath the building as well. A couple of renderings. This would be from the east side of the building, showing the front entrance. So another view, another perspective from the front entrance. This would be from the west side. So on the Saddlebrook Estates side. We have a landscape buffer wall that we'll be installing along the western boundary. This will come in some comments here in just a minute. One of the feedback was, could we carry on that wall past our property line in order to make it, you don't want to partially cover a property. So we're carrying that down further to the south. The feedback from two of the neighbors, again, I'll get into some more of these details, but one of the feedback from two of the neighbors was, can you get rid of that fence that we have out there right now? It's kind of an eyesore, replace it with your buffer wall. And we said that was our plan, was to do that. Another thing we discussed as we had a 6-foot wall shown to do this. After getting the feedback from the neighbors, we decided to take this to 8 foot on the height of the wall. Here's a perspective that we have done. This is, again, lots of feedback, lots of discussions. I want to get into some of the details of this. So on the western side of this, you will see where we have an 8-foot masonry screening wall. At the feedback of the Planning Commission, which I had not thought about it, we had not thought about it, but we have a fairly significant green space buffer before you get to the drive. It allows us enough room to put in a berm. So we've added a berm in there with trees that can go on top. And I'll walk you through this kind of briefly here. But if you take the 8-foot wall and then we are going to be able to berm that with 2 rows of trees. The trees are going to be approximately 12 foot high at planting. So the sight line there at the time of planting would only be the very top of the roof. Okay, that's at the time of planting. Within 5 years, at approximately 5 years, we are estimating, our landscape engineers are estimating, they will go to about 22 foot. And this is a mix of oaks and elm that you are accustomed to seeing here. That goes to 22 feet, and a significant difference between the sight lines from the time of planting and at 5 years. At full maturity, they're expected to get to 40 feet, which would be even that much more significant. In fact, I had even concern. A lot of people say plant more trees, plant more trees. We are planting significantly, but if you do too many, it actually takes away the roots. It goes overgrown, which we don't want, and nobody's going to want that. So we want to do a combination that creates a great buffer, but it's going to be a long-term amenity. Another discussion point that we had with the neighborhood was, we don't necessarily want decks on our side looking at us. Now, on the side of the neighbors, those houses that are designed, there's very little or hardly any windows on that side of any of the houses. But all of our decks are on the corner of the building, so they will either face to the south or they will face to the north. They do not face to the west. Any of the decks on the corners. We also had discussions about the windows. We have horizontal blinds that are typically going to be kept closed, especially during the hot weather months right now when the sun is on the west. So we can pull this back up if you have questions. Just wanted to let you know it's available. Planning Commission comments, as you are aware, we were unanimously recommended by the Planning Commission. They had a lot of questions about the co-op model and how it works. Again, I can get into that if you have questions about it. They asked us specifically to look at a berm in our landscape buffer area, which we have added. They mentioned that maybe you don't need the money into the 8-foot wall. The chair of the Planning Commission, his name escapes me, he said maybe you don't need to spend the money on the 8-foot wall. Do it on the berm, and we decided I think it's best if you just do both. So we're keeping both of those, and just a couple quick pictures. These are homes that are going to average just under 1,400 square feet. They're owner occupied. If I had to guess, all the years we've been managing these, I think the average time of stay is probably 9 or 10 years. We have people stay way beyond that. So they're long-term owners. One of the things with the co-op model that is unique, not only is it owned, they set up reserves from day one. You all have encountered it a million times when you've looked at multifamily projects. What are they going to look like in 10 years? That's the thing you're always going through. Who's the owner? Who's the manager? Are they going to take care of it? It's the beauty of this model is that they're the owners. They've got skin in the game. They got reserve programs set up from day one to take care of this place long term. Not only is it needed, but the structure is set up from the beginning. So I know that is going to be a huge benefit, and we have actually had a couple of neighbors call us and say they're in favor. We've had a couple of neighbors write in support. They just wanted to make sure all their concerns were addressed, and I believe we have. I believe we have done that. So the concerns with the privacy wall we talked about, it providing enhanced design emergency gate at Clara Drive. One of the concerns was Clara Drive. One of the huge benefits of this is now this is not a through street. There are definitely neighbors in favor of not having this as a through street. So as a part of that, we're adding in an enhanced design security gate for emergency access only. We'll put it in at the beginning of construction. One of the other things we talked about is not having construction traffic come through. So one of the things we will make sure is in Google mapping that it's coming to Davis address and not their street. So construction equipment is not coming through and it's going, oh geez, I can't get through, and turning around and going back. I think that was a reason for concern. The balconies on the Village Cooperative looking next door, we're going to be 121 feet away, but we're also going to have them all facing south or north. And we talked about the buffering that will be added in as well. Preventing construction traffic access, I mentioned. I don't have a big concern about this, but if I was a neighbor, I would understand the concern totally. So I don't have any concerns about this between signage and mapping. I think we would be perfectly fine here. Stormwater management was a question. When we had our neighborhood meeting, like I said, we had about 35 to 40 people. There was definitely voices of concern over stormwater management. Clayton did a super helpful job of answering that the city, if there is problems with stormwater management, we're not increasing the flow. We're improving the site. It's designed, the site was designed to partially go into this, developed. There's a stormwater management system there. If there's issues with it, the city will be able to maintain that. But we're improving the site. I think that's a key term. We're improving this site. Sufficiency of parking. I said 27. It's actually 28 outdoor spaces plus 57 in the garage. If you look at our parking study example we used, you'll see from all of our other communities observed every day over a 1-week time frame, we're going to average between 9 and 13 spaces used on the outside. And that's partially the profile of the people living there, and partially because it's not all couples and there's no kids living there. Light transfer across the property. I know you have lots of discussions on light transfer. We have a light illumination study in there you can look at. We won't be transferring light to surrounding properties, but we also can't because we have residents living in the building. So we only have a couple of poles. The rest are low ballards near the ground. So the transfer of light across the property will be none. Landscaping and cleaning up the landscaping on the northern property line. I mean, I joked about Minnesota earlier, but landscaping is something that is part of the DNA in Minnesota, and everywhere we go, it's important to us to have quality landscaping in our communities. I know it's important here. I think everybody would agree we're going to do significantly more landscaping than most developments you will see come through applications here. We were asked a couple of comments from the city. This came from your staff to make a vehicle connection to the commercial to the north, and so we are providing a paved connection to the north. Although it's not a through street, if it ever became one, if that ever changed in the future, you would have access without having to come to 55 cooperative owners and asking them for permission. It's being set up right now, not just for vehicular, but also with the pedestrian-friendly idea in mind that it's going to be better for those commercial uses to have pedestrian ability to get there easily. So we provided that as well as sidewalk connectivity all the way to Davis. We do have people that like to stay super active. We have a younger generation of retirees. They want to stay active. And so having this walking trails and connectivity is huge to our owners. And I know it's going to be a huge amenity to the area just to have that connectivity. So we agreed. We increased the width of the drive aisle right at the entrance of Davis. So you'll see in there where it kind of flares out. If you've seen the site plan, it flares out, and we have a lot of width there in order to get traffic in and out easily. One of the things everybody talks about everywhere I go, every application, traffic is always discussed. And Davis is busy at peak times. So is 95% of our other developments because people want to be near amenities. Our owners aren't typically going at those peak times. They don't want to. They have the luxury of not having to. So that width is widened there, both for our development and the anticipation of future retail along that corridor. We're providing a very nice, high-quality looking gate at Clara Boulevard at the city's request. So conclusion, we believe very firmly we're the best option here for many, many different reasons. Number one, I know everybody comes in here, developer, and says, you need our apartments, and you need our assisted living, and you need our senior. We do 4 projects a year. I pick. I mean, I'm the one who selects where we go. And you just don't see numbers like this, and you can't ignore them. And you're going to have more applications in the future, and you're going to have hard choices before you on what are the best options. And I just can't imagine that not having owner-occupied wouldn't be better than renting. And our owners that's why our model is so popular. This location ranks near the top of any locations we've looked at more than 2 years. But we're talking about 10 states and 50 cities. Meets a desperate need for housing for retirees who are active adults. Baby boomers are 46 through 64. Some of you are boomers. The oldest boomers right now are 75. The wave is going to continue to come. And it's not going to be, we want 400 and 500 and 700 square foot apartments. They're going to want to take a place that they own now, and they're going to want to go to a place that they still own, and they're around other owners. And there's a huge need for that, and it's much more than 55 homes. And we want to be in North Richland Hills. You heard me say this before. We want to be here. We chose this as our first place. It was an easy choice. This is a huge metro. This was not a hard choice. And it has to do with a number of factors I mentioned and many more. We also want to be a great neighbor. I can't emphasize that enough. You can probably imagine, the things that developers will come in and say, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. But one of the things that's important about this, we are keeping this small. We want to be a good neighbor. We want people to want us. We want you to look at this place in 15 years and say, we're glad we said yes to that project. We want our owners to love this and to love where they're at. We want their kids to be at peace that this is where we're putting mom and dad. So we wanted to go through the conversations. We've learned a lot over those conversations about what people are looking for. And I think it goes without saying, you probably already know this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Our cooperative owners bring a lot of economic strength. They're here. They go to church here. A lot of them grew up here. A lot of them raise kids here. And they bring economic strength to this corridor, which is a key area of your town. And they're going to support those businesses there, especially during what we've gone through the last 18 months. And I think it's a huge strength to this area. We ask for your support this evening and for the thousands of active retirees who are here now or will be soon, who are going to be looking for community and ownership. I'm going to stop there and ask for questions. If you have anything at all on the co-op, I have additional slides. I know you know about the cooperative model. I'd be happy to take any questions that you have, and we appreciate your time this evening.
Council, any questions? Shane, thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor.
Clayton, can you please give us staff's reports and then P&Z's recommendations?
Yeah, as Mr. Wright mentioned, he has a number of other slides on here regarding the co-op structure. So I'm going to go ahead and go through those relatively quickly so I can skip to my slides. There we go. So just to summarize the application, again, this is about 3.5 acres. What's being proposed here is a 55-unit independent senior living cooperative or multifamily complex in a cooperative format. 6 one-bedroom units and 49 two-bedroom units make up that 55-unit complex, which equates to 15.9 dwelling units per acre. Comparatively to all the recent multifamily developments that you've seen come in our TODs and hometown, that's a fairly low density. Typically, you're seeing about at least 25, typically 30 units an acre, are many of the applications that you've seen over the past 10 or so years. The height is currently measured at 45 feet to the peak of the roof, and the primary roof line is 30 feet. They're providing 83 parking spaces. 26 of those are surface, 57 underground parking garages. I know you've heard a couple different numbers of 27, 28, and 26. What's being provided is 83 parking spaces in general. That could also fluctuate depending on the final engineering plans as well. But as Mr. Wright mentioned, they did provide a parking study based on all their other cooperative properties throughout the nation. That equates to about 1.5 parking spaces per unit, which is also in line with our transit-oriented development district code requirement for parking. And it is short of the requirement for any R7MF zoning district requirement for parking, as well as the town center zoning district requirement. So that parking study is intended to demonstrate what their actual needs are. And that parking count is included in the residential plan development zoning district standards. Landscaping on site, as Mr. Wright mentioned, they're providing 41% of the site in the form of open space landscaping or permeable area. Most importantly, on the west side of the project, they're providing a buffer yard of a 45-foot depth adjacent to the Saddlebrook Estates neighborhood. That buffer yard includes 13 live oaks, 5 lacebark elms, 7 Arizona cypress, and then the 8-foot masonry screening wall as well along that western property line. That would replace the existing 6-foot tall wood stockade fence that is there today. And then the raised berm, Mr. Wright mentioned that. It's a little asterisk next to that as a reminder to me that that was not part of City Council's packet. That was added, the berm portion of that was just added right before City Council. In between your packet and tonight's meeting. So if the City Council were to make any motion to approve this, staff would ask that you include that berm in the motion to make sure that gets covered. And then there you see the exhibit that Mr. Wright mentioned in his presentation. So on the right side of the screen, just simply highlighted all the areas where the trees are located on that western property line. Not all of them, but the larger ones. So you see there's a 2-layer system of trees here on that west property line, and then across the drive aisle and parking, you also have additional trees there. One thing that staff worked with them on is also, as you're looking down Clara Drive, that there's a opportunity there for a large tree to eventually get large in height and width to help kind of act as a terminus for the view down Clara to soften that view down Clara. Also want to mention that north property line of the project site. There are two main areas where they're proposing tree preservation. There's an elm at the far northwest corner of the property there that is being preserved, and then there's another, I think it's an elm at the far northeast corner of the property that is also being preserved as part of the application. The rest of the tree line would be removed, unfortunately, as part of the grading and preparation for the site. However, a lot of those trees are fence line trees, trees that you would typically see start to grow just because you're not maintaining it and mowing it. So those are typically your fence line trees and shrubs. So in their place, they're proposing various vitex, lacebark elms, junipers, and other material there for a solid screen on that north property line. And this is the overall landscape plan. I will also make one point of clarification between, I need to go back a couple slides, between your packet and tonight's presentation. That driveway connection to the north has also moved a little bit further west, and the point of that is to align with the driveway on the commercial side in between two buildings. So it would be a natural connection between the two buildings on the commercial side. So that has moved a little bit further west. Mr. Wright talked about the vehicular connection and access to the property. There is no direct frontage on Davis Boulevard. This 3.5 acres, again, is at the far northwest corner of the site. So the zoning change and the zoning boundary does not have any Davis Boulevard frontage technically. The driveway that's being proposed would go through kind of off-site improvements to Davis Boulevard. The TxDOT conceptual approval of the driveway location, from what we understand, that city level is pending. Mr. Wright mentioned that there has been an approval, so that of course we'll find out about in detail from TxDOT and their conceptual approval. There's a 26-foot fire lane loop around the building, which meets the fire lane standards for the building itself. And then there is the emergency access connection to Clara Drive. That is there because the number of units both on this property and the Saddlebrook Estates neighborhood exceed the 30 units maximum for a second point of access for fire and emergency services. So that would serve as emergency access only in the cases of emergencies. And then, as I mentioned, the future access to the shopping center to the north. That image on the bottom there, that is the detailed elevation of the emergency access gate connection, which would have an emergency Knox box and other features that, again, would only allow it for emergency access. They are also providing pedestrian access in the form of a 5-foot sidewalk loop around the building, and then sidewalk connections to Clara.
You said 5 foot? 5 foot sidewalk?
5 foot, yes. A sidewalk connection to Clara to the west as well, and then that sidewalk would go out to Davis Boulevard and to the north to connect this development to the commercial areas at North Tarrant Parkway and Davis Boulevard. We already mentioned the screening wall, just some additional details on that. That red line, the applicant has agreed to go ahead and extend that to the southeast corner of the adjacent residential property. So that red line would actually go a little bit further. And that's already in the requirements for this residential plan development. It's already covered in that. Some building materials. So you can see on the material board here that they're proposing fiber cement lap siding for quite a bit of the project, and then also brick and stone veneers. On the elevation material square footage chart on the bottom there, I've highlighted in red the areas of masonry material, so that's going to be your brick and stone. Recall that before SB 2439, that would have been 85% as a minimum requirement. And these of course, don't equal anywhere near that 85%. But Mr. Wright showed you some of the elevations and their intent to kind of mix up the materials, mix up the color palette and everything to make it interesting. But for instance, this north elevation here, 11% on their masonry coverage, 22% on this west elevation, about 30% there on their east elevation. So you can see it's below that 85%, but they're still providing some brick and stone, mainly on the first floor elevation. I've also highlighted the glazing, that's the windows and doors in blue there. As we've been talking about different projects coming to City Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission, you recall that kind of the sweet spot is 30% to make it look a little bit more urban, but typically you'll see 20% for more suburban style multifamily projects. So you see they're right at that 20% for this. So it's typical for your multifamily project in a suburban area. So the building elevations are on your screen here. That north elevation would face the commercial shopping center. You can also see that the driveway into the underground parking garage would also be located here. So that's why it's kind of sunken down a little bit in this general vicinity. The east elevation, that would be the elevation that faces Davis Boulevard. I'm showing you the technical drawings. Of course, the applicant showed you more of the three-dimensional renderings, so we can also refer back to those if you need to. The south elevation, that would face the remainder of that 8.33 acres of vacant land. And then the west elevation, that would be the elevation that faces the Salderberg Estates residential neighborhood. Some of the discussion that we've had at the Development Review Committee level was about that piecemeal or fragmentary approach that City Council has said a little bit, has concerns about moving forward with the development of North Richland Hills in the future. Just as we continue to develop these last remaining pieces in North Richland Hills, are we conceptually and comprehensively planning for eventual build out? So along those lines, the area in blue would remain as the 8.3 acres of undeveloped land. And the concern that we at the Development Review Committee level had is that you're going to have duplicate and parallel fire lanes likely, unless this fire lane is a joint fire lane between the commercial projects along Davis Boulevard and Century Hills. There would likely be a parallel fire lane. So again, inefficient use of land there for you to have a parallel fire lane. That also eats into your developable depth for that pad site. This pad site is already a little bit less than your typical commercial pad site. So it's more appropriate for office uses, but not really appropriate for a large drive-through user, for instance. It's not deep enough to really get check the boxes for some of your larger drive-through uses. And then also, since this would now be considered a residential use, those pad sites up front would now be considered to require landscaping and screening adjacent to residential uses. So we're talking walls and dense landscaping and everything between those pad sites and this residential project behind them. Very similar to what you experienced with the Dutch Brothers application. They had to seek waiver from that masonry screening wall between them and the Watermere project. So it'd be the same situation. Just want to make council aware of this, all these concerns that DRC had moving forward, because it would probably limit the land uses and the users on these pad sites up front. This is a side-by-side comparison of the R7MF, the multifamily zoning district, on the left side, and the proposed planned development zoning district on the right. So you can see that they are falling below the maximum height that is allowed in the R7MF district. They do have a little bit less land area than the R7MF district by that 3.5 acres versus the 4 acres which is required. There is no screening wall being proposed along Davis Boulevard, so that would be a waiver to the R7MF district standards. Otherwise, a screening wall would be required along Davis. They're also not providing an entry gate. The garage itself will have a garage door, but there's no gate going into the property for the subdivision. And then we talked about the parking. If you apply the R7MF zoning district standards to this property, they'd be required 135 parking spaces. They're proposing 83, or 1.5 spaces per unit. Lighting comes up whenever we talk about some of these projects adjacent to residential neighborhoods. So this is the photometric plan that is reviewed by staff. You can see on the left side the various light standards that would be implemented on this project. The pink being the maximum 20-foot tall parking lot lights. You see there's one there and then two up front. So 3 total parking lot lights on the project. And then a lot of these are the bollards, the pedestrian bollards around the property. So those are going to be about 3 foot in height and just casting light on the sidewalk around the property. And then some dark sky compliant fixtures on the north and south elevations of the property as well. There are none shown on the west side. And all these little numbers, that's the cast, the amount of light and the amount of lumens on that portion of the property, and where you see a 0.0, that means that there would be no light created off of that new fixture that is being proposed. So that would be current ambient light on that area. And this is the cross section that Mr. Wright showed you, and I also showed a little bit earlier. But just to also add that this was not part of the again, the berms were not part of City Council's packet. So if the intent is for City Council to require these berms, simply make that part of your motion, and we'll make sure that during development those will be added. The Planning and Zoning Commission held their public hearing on this item on May 20th, and voted 6-0 to recommend approval. And at this time, I'll be happy to take any questions that you have.
Clayton, my first question was concerning the sidewalk, but you addressed that as 5 foot. For the development of the remaining 8.3 acres, is one access point off Davis going to hinder that development back in the southwest corner?
So we knew that was going to be a possibility, that TxDOT was not going to allow a second point of access. Caroline Wagner is also here. She might be able to speak to that, but it will most likely make development more difficult. As far as finding users for the property, having one point of access onto Davis Boulevard will make it more difficult.
Unless it's more like some of the garden offices we have on mid-cities or something
Right.
of that nature. But it's gonna eliminate a strip center of any type, because you're not gonna have enough ingress egress to access that back point, the way I see it.
Yeah, I would agree with that it's going to significantly limit the types of users that are going to locate here.
Next
All the more
question
reason
is-
to have that connection to the north as well, just for an additional, because remember, if you only have that one point of access, any of the residents here in Century Hills that simply want to go to Sonic, for instance, they would have to get up to Davis Boulevard, cross 4 lanes of traffic to go north a couple hundred feet to come back in, likely into a right in, right out only type of driveway. So, yeah, that's why that connection to the north is also important.
And from, Caroline, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but TxDOT is still talking about medians up and down Davis in the long term, are they not?
That's correct. The median project, it's not funded. The current timeline that they're looking at is potentially 2025. And it's part of those discussions with TxDOT that the developer had. I was also on that phone call with them, kind of reminding them, because some of the TxDOT staff had not been part of that earlier median conceptual discussion. The location where the Alamo driveway is that we recommend lining this up with would be the furthest north full service median opening until you get to North Tarrant Parkway, which is why we felt it would make sense. TxDOT was kind of struggling with the fact that this would require, it would have to go to the deviation committee because it's closer to the driveway on the west side. So they were focusing on that. You know, from our perspective, it makes sense that those two driveways would align, because in the short term, we eliminate opposing lefts as a safety concern, and in the long term, we wouldn't be dealing with a steady stream of U-turning traffic at that median opening.
And there's another opening just north of that that'll be to the Sonic, but with this opening here from Alamo Draft House and this development, then there's a good chance the Sonic driveway won't happen.
That's correct. So
Because you're-
with that future median project, there would be, of course, North Tarrant Parkway, the signal. There would be a median opening here, and the next median opening to the south would be at Thornbridge Drive.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. If this gets approved, is there a way we can notify or have the developer notify their potential owners that that vacant land, all that blue, will not remain vacant forever? That there will be more than likely commercial development, or at least give them a zoning map so they'll know vacant lot means future development on Davis Boulevard? And maybe that's a question to Shane if this thing passes, so that the residents can't come in later and say, I didn't know that was going to develop.
I'll let the applicant address that. It would be a rare zoning ordinance requirement for that to be placed in there. I do want to mention two things I forgot to mention, Mr. Mayor. Number one, construction access. It was mentioned at the Planning and Zoning Commission, and it was also mentioned at the April 7th neighborhood meeting. So staff went ahead and made that part of the ordinance before this evening, that during construction, that Clara Drive and Saddlebrook Drive not be used for construction activities, and that also that the gate, the emergency access gate, be installed prior to inspection of the foundation. I think is what the timing was, so that gate would be in prior to the rest of the project going in.
And should this not pass and it come up as another development that's not a planned development and all they're asking for is a zoning change, would we have the same ability to restrict that developer to not use Clear Lane? If it was just, say, what we show on our 2035.
Right. I don't believe so. It would probably have to be negotiated as some separate agreement. And then also, the applicant mentioned during his presentation the balconies facing or being oriented to the north and south. That is not part of any requirement in the currently drafted PD regulations, so that might also be something the City Council considers adding to any motion for approval.
No balconies to the west? Or just?
Yes. Oriented to the west. Their current elevations, I want to make sure that this is clear. This is the west elevation here. They do have balconies shown, but they're not oriented. So the doors are not facing west. The doors are facing north and south. But there are balconies that
that you can access.
The sides face the west.
Council, you all got that? Okay. Council questions? Mason?
Yeah, just clarification on the access on that gate. So we talked about that being an emergency access only. So just to clarify, that's accessible only by someone flipping a switch at the property. I mean, at the facility, correct?
Either direction. So from Saddlebrook Estates or from Century Hills, that would be a Opticom activated gate per our fire department standards. So as they strobe the flashers, it would open either direction. I would mention that there is a pedestrian opening for clear pedestrian access between the two properties.
Right.
So Mason, the question then would be, it's emergency access for city facilities only. It's not for the people in that neighborhood have emergency access or the people in the residences have access. It's
Right,
just
that's
our
correct.
fire and police.
That's right. Yes.
Thank you for the clarification.
Mm-hmm.
Scott?
Yeah, and I'd like a little further clarification on what you said, Clayton, or even from the applicant, but about these balconies oriented north and south, but on the west side of the building, please.
I'll go ahead and let you address that.
So, in the corner here, this is what I'm talking about. This is where the deck would be, in the corner there. And then on the southwest corner here. And then right here on that south corner, and then on this corner, north corner. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So when their front door opens, it'll either be looking directly to the north or it'll be looking directly to the south. And then there's a small reveal that would look that way, but you're
Okay.
going to be, the door's going to be facing south or north.
Got it. Thank you.
Then to answer your question about the zoning, we're not 100% sold yet because we're not even approved. But we've told every owner, everybody knows it's retail commercial that's out there. We've told them the history. If I can be any more clear, I will, but we've been 100% clear with them on it.
I just don't want somebody to come in and say, well, a real estate agent told me there would never be anything developed there.
Yeah, no.
Most of us know there is, but
Yeah, you can't be in this business as long as we haven't tell people that stuff. We're usually not getting an exactly 3.5 acre parcel. There's usually remnant land. And some of the uses along Davis, I had I don't know that they're going to be able to do anything, but I had a conversation with a derm surgeon, a dermatology clinic. That was one that was like, will fit in there. That's the type of uses I could see.
that's what I would see also.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Tito, you had a question for Clayton? Thanks,
Yes,
Shane.
Clayton, on the parking garage, I know you were talking about there was no security gate, but you mentioned a garage door. So is there a garage entry into the parking garage? Are they individual just open spots, spaces?
Yeah, so the garage entry on the north side, I think it's pretty easy to decide where to put it. Put it on the north side. They open it with their garage door just like their house. It's on a 30 or 45-second timer, so it automatically closes behind them. We ask them to wait till it closes. Then they go to their space, and it's an open garage with oversized spaces.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And Clayton, one more thing. Can you put up the lighting chart again?
Rita?
Thank you, Mayor. Clayton, I saw two comments on the land use plan. One comment was about commercial retail, and then I think under DRC, they mentioned urban village and high density. Did I miss something? Is it, the land use plan is deemed commercial retail for 2030, not village and,
Yeah, so the land use plan recommends retail commercial.
Okay.
The DRC comments that you're referring to state that typically multifamily development, higher density residential is more appropriate for the urban village designations on our land use plan. So places like City Point, Hometown, the two TODs, and other urban village, future urban village areas. So that's where the comment came in for the TODs and hometown areas.
okay. And then can you, I think it's a second slide or illustration from the very end, where it takes the building of this development and how it looks down onto the neighborhood behind this. So those top lines above the first, second, third floor, that's roof area, correct?
That's correct, yes.
So why are those lines not a little bit lower looking from the third floor down? Because you wouldn't be up there looking all the way down in this neighborhood, or am I just missing something?
So the applicant is preparing this slide here, and you all can also address it more, but it's from the perspective of the pedestrian
Right.
on the residential side, and they're simply saying that the visibility from a pedestrian on the adjacent
I see,
property
can see all the way up to the roof.
would be the
Okay.
roof.
Okay, all right. I understand, thank you.
The question?
Yeah, there were two comments on the view from the deck, but the majority of the comments were from the west looking east, from the east looking west from the building. I labeled there the deck floor on the third floor is 27.3 feet. So I didn't want to put too many lines in here, but if you had somebody standing on that deck, which is looking south or north anyway, they'd be standing on a floor that's 27.3 feet.
Okay,
And clearly you can see the sight line would be below those other two.
right, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mason?
Yeah, for the record, can staff provide a little bit of detail on, or I mean, a little bit of context for this piece here, sort of the some of the situations within the city where we have multifamily buildings in close proximity to single-family residents like this, as far as the.
Yeah, the most recent one is, of course, Watermere. We likened this entire project to the Watermere project all throughout the DRC review, because you have the commercial frontage along Davis Boulevard, you have the larger building to the back of the property. Sorry, I'm getting to the site plan here. The larger building at the back of the property, and then with that vehicular emergency access connection as well. So this setback from the residential property line to the three-story building is 121 feet. That meets the minimum requirement for a setback of a three-story building from a single-family residential. A three-story multifamily building from a single-family residential zoning district. So that's a minimum of 120 feet. This is at 121 feet and some change. You mentioned about other projects in North Richland Hills as far as context is concerned, and I do have some examples. Give me 1 second. The village of Bear Creek, which is just south of this location on Davis Boulevard on the west side. There are many areas of the village of Bear Creek where you're within about 93 feet of a three-story building to the rear. I'm sorry, that's another project. 130 to 160 feet. Areas of 130, areas of 160 from a three-story building to the rear yards of single-family residential. In the hometown area, the atria at hometown, along Riverside, that's about 93 feet from the front porches of single-family residences on the south side. So there's three-story atria across the street from a single-family residential on the south side. Couple other projects. Three-story apartment about 125 feet to 130 feet from adjacent residence at the Tides on Harwood. And then there's one other project. Waterford on the Green, which is on Glenview Drive, two-story apartments about 50 to 55 feet from adjacent residence. I'm not sure if any of that answered your question, council member, but
No.
that's some examples.
That's helpful context. Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions? Clayton, thank you.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing, and I've already opened the public hearing. At this time, I'm going to ask our city secretary if she has any requests to speak for the public hearing. Alicia?
Yes, Mayor, we do, and I will remind the public that when I call you up to speak at the podium, to please state your name and address for the record. You will have 3 minutes to address the city council, and the timer will be located on both displays up here. And the first person is Susan, and Susan, I'm afraid I'm going to not pronounce it correctly. Imke.
Married carelessly 48 years ago. I spent the rest of my life explaining that name to people. Fortunately, he was a very good guy. So, Shane stole some of my best material, but he presented it more eloquently than I would be able to do, so I feel okay about that. Just a little background, I am a big fan of our city. I grew up in Lubbock, Texas, met and married my husband out there. He was an accounting professor at Tech. And over the years, we've lived several places. He moved with me then to teach at Barrow in Phoenix. And after about 4 years, he was really sick of the desert. And I figured out over the next 2 years, he's an incurable Texan. And there is no 12-step program for that, so the next decision we made, we knew Lubbock wasn't our place. I love my home city, but it best belongs in that country western song, In Your Rearview Mirror. So we chose this very intentionally. We wanted to live in Tarrant County. We didn't particularly want to. Frank taught in Arlington many years ago, and so Arlington and Fort Worth were not our prime look at. And it's just been a wonderful choice. My house is out not too far from your elegant new offices, Mayor, off of Holiday Lane. It is not an extravagant house. I've been very careful in my decision whether to go ahead with this development for the cooperative, because all of you know what real estate prices are doing right now. I don't have a single other investment, going up at that rate. So, but it is an important thing and time in my life to do that. For many years, I was the designer of projects outdoors at our house and chose for my sweet husband to be the implementer. That's not been working out well the past 4 or 5 years, and I'm wary with it. I'm wary with the cost. I've looked very careful at condos and single-story townhomes, which aren't easy to come by anywhere in mid-cities, and rents. What I was looking at when we were first thinking of selling our house 4 years ago, the rents are exponentially higher in the same complexes now. I'm concerned that's going to keep happening, and our cost in the village cooperative is pretty much fixed. You won't see the same escalation. And I've got a contract that I've done the due diligence with, and my elder law attorney has reviewed that with me, and my finance person has reviewed it, and I just feel really good about it. And the folks from Minnesota have just been stellar at getting down to the details. It's sitting with individual couples or folks when they need a little more clarification on the contract or other items about this. So I feel good about Real Estate Equities being a developer here, and we'll be good neighbors.
Thank you.
The next person is Jill Gentry. If you can please approach the podium, please state your name and address for the record, please. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Welcome.
Hi. My name is Jill Gentry. I live at 1108 Shady Lane North in Keller, Texas. I'm the sales manager for Village Cooperative of Century Hills. I've been in the senior living industry for many years in a marketing capacity, previously opening an independent living, assisted living, and memory care from the ground up. So I understand the industry, I understand the client, and I somewhat understand the construction process. When I learned that Senior Cooperative was coming to Texas, I was excited for the new option and curious to learn more about co-ops. It's a win on so many levels, from socialization to no maintenance to the pride of ownership, to mention a few. And I really do enjoy offering this option to our seniors. Most come into my office starting a new chapter in their life, and it is a very important chapter. They're looking to move from their homes that they've been in 20, 30, and 40 plus years. This chapter does bring excitement, but it also brings reluctance. But they have made the decision to get out and look at the options and see what's available. So I'll just mention a few of the options that they have. They look at downsizing into a smaller single-family home. While good for some, they still have the upkeep, the responsibility of maintaining, and the hidden cost of owning a home. They look at condos. While it is ownership, they still have the responsibility of keeping everything in working order. If they have a plumbing leak, if the HVAC goes out, there again, they have that replacement cost and the hassle of getting it fixed. And in addition, if there are any upgrades needed, say the roof needs to be replaced, maybe resurfacing of a parking lot, the owner will get a special or a separate assessment for that expense. They also look at independent living. This seems like a good option, as they can live a carefree lifestyle with prepared meals, scheduled activities, and socialization. The cost is problematic, as they are paying for amenities that some do not need and they really don't even want. They're also paying thousands of dollars a month with actually no return on their investment. Now that Real Estate Equities has selected North Richland Hills as their first cooperative in Texas, seniors have another option that offered the best in senior living. They can downsize, they can get rid of the maintenance, and say goodbye to the unexpected cost of ownership, including a special assessments. There has never been a special assessment in any cooperative, not just a Real Estate Equities co-op. Maintenance is taken care of from the inside and out. So if the garbage disposal breaks, an appliance goes on the blink, they simply make a phone call and it's taken care of, freeing up their time and allowing them to spend time with family and socializing with like-minded homeowners. With someone always home, a co-op member never has to feel lonely. Plus, co-op ownership does come with return on investment. They are paying to own their on building and and they have the control to operate
Gentry,
it,
Ms. Gentry, your
looking
time's
out for
up.
their best interest. Thank you very much.
Jill, I take it you're in favor.
Oh, yes, I'm in favor.
Okay, good enough. Thank you.
The next person is James Harris. If you'll approach the podium, please, and please state your name and address for the record.
Mr. Harris, I think you got here at like 5 o'clock.
Yeah, we were here early.
You were one of the first ones here.
I learned this from my mother. She was always early to everything that she ever went to.
I got to say, that's Tito. Tito shows up 45 minutes before every meeting.
My name is Jim Harris. My wife, Kathleen, and I live at 1432 Cat Mountain Trail in Keller. We would like to speak this evening of our support for the proposed Village Cooperative of Century Hills. In 2018, I retired after 38 years with IBM. We began investigating our future need to downsize our home and prepare for a fixed income future. We looked at 55-plus active adult communities all the way from Little Elm to Mansfield and even Red Oak. We also investigated smaller homes in Granbury, Waco, and Temple. What we found didn't seem to make financial nor practical sense for us. We honestly love where we live. We moved to this area 28 years ago. We currently live 1 mile west down North Tarrant Parkway from the proposed site of the Village Cooperative. We have witnessed stable, steady, thoughtful growth throughout North Richland Hills and Keller over the years. We were actually here before North Tarrant Parkway and Precinct Line were completed. We raised all 5 of our children from Shady Grove Elementary through Keller High School. The Village Cooperative gives us the ability to stay in the community that we love. We live in a neighborhood in which the homeowners have always been concerned progress in the area would affect property values, so we really do understand those who may have those concerns. The Village Cooperative will add a beautifully landscaped buffer between the single-family homes on the west and the future commercial development to the east. Our neighborhood is becoming much more multi-generational. We have a next-door neighbor whose husband passed away last year, who, along with her loss, is struggling with all of the home maintenance issues that come up from time to time. Just down the street from her are 2 families who recently moved in with small children. Our neighborhood will continue to stay vibrant as younger families move in and are able to enjoy our neighborhood and take advantage of the excellent school district. I was a business analyst in my career, so it was my job to review facts and make recommendations. The cooperative concept makes really good sense to us because it gives us an opportunity to realize the appreciated value of our home over the last 28 years with only a portion invested in the cooperative share. The monthly fee is affordable and ensures consistency throughout our time there. As owners, we will have a vested interest in the management of the cooperative, which will ensure a pride of ownership along with being a good neighbor. In summary, the cooperative offers a sense of community, security, and value to its owners, and we think a beautiful addition to the adjoining neighborhood and community. And I just want to thank you for your time tonight.
James, thank you.
Next is Paul Gordon. If you'll approach the podium, please state your name and address for the record.
Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. My name's Paul Gordon. I live at 8109 Hallmark. I actually live in Thornbridge, right across the street from the development, along with my 2 sons who live in the neighborhood and 5 of my grandchildren, and my other lives down. So, like Mr. Harris, I have a lot of interest in staying in the neighborhood, and not just because of my family, but because we've lived here, or I've lived here now for about 8 years, and in my mind, this is the absolute best place to live. We've got access in that area to a movie theater, to a couple of drugstores, to a Walmart, to several fast food and good restaurants, not to mention the urgent care place across the street. So to me, it's a great location. Honestly, the thing about this is it just ticks all the boxes off for me. And I truly hope you'll approve this project. I lost my wife about 2 years ago. So my living situation changed rather dramatically. We have a big house in Thornbridge, and it's 4,200 square feet, and it's me, and it doesn't fit my needs any longer. So when this became available, or when I became aware of this project, I got real excited, and I am real excited. My excitement grew when I got to meet the principals, and like the other speakers said, I have a lot of confidence in these guys. Not only do they have a successful track record, but they also have a really well thought out heart for wanting to be a part of the community, and I appreciate that. My career, I was a salesperson, so unlike Mr. Harris, who was an analyst, I kind of looked at things from a different perspective, and from my perspective, this project makes a lot of sense, not only for me, but for this area. I think North Richland Hills has an opportunity here, and by the way, I want to compliment you guys. This is my first opportunity in being involved in anything like this, and the thoroughness of which you all go through a project like this really makes me feel good about being a resident here. So thank you for those efforts. But the entire project, from a sales standpoint, makes wonderful sense to me for the reasons that were mentioned. We're going to be able to participate in the equity. We're going to continue to be a consistent and I think valuable member of the community. And honestly, in my situation, I'm 68 years old. I'm a member of a senior softball team that plays at Northfield Park, the North Richland Hills Hawks, and I'm excited about that. And I intend to live here not 10 years, but maybe 20 or 25 years. I'm healthy. I have many volunteer opportunities, and it just makes sense. A place like this just makes sense for me. So without taking any more of your time, I really thank you for your time tonight, and I appreciate your support of this project. So thank you very much.
Paul, thank you.
Mary Michaels, if you'll please approach the podium and state your name and address for the record.
Evening.
Welcome.
My name is Mary Michaels, and I live at 8401 Revenue Way, so that's Liberty Village. So it's right down the street from this project. My husband, for over 35 years, developed multifamily projects and student housing. And so I have heard through my entire married life people that hate multifamily places to live. I lived in one. I think I turned out okay. So when I did hear some rumblings about this being multifamily, when I called the city and got some more information, I heard then it was for senior citizens. Sad but true. I am one. I didn't think I would ever get to this point, but happily my gray hair, it got me here. I've taught kindergarten for 32 years. I never thought I would be looking at senior housing. But even though where I am, I'm very content with the project. I moved here from the Grapevine-Colleyville area where we lived for over 30 years. And my children are all grown. I do have one that has come back and lived with me. So we kind of have a feudal system going on at my house. But I do think it's important for this city and all cities to consider the timeline of people that live in their communities. When you start looking at people and their biographies, you see that we have many people approaching the century mark, and they are active people. And even my mother lives close by. She's 94. So I do applaud you in considering this. I do hope you approve it. I just feel like that any traffic concerns or ingress and egress have been addressed. I don't feel like it that I've lived in this community almost 10 years, that it's been a problem for me getting out onto Davis Boulevard from where we are, and there's 42 homes. I also want to say that I hope you consider more developments like this, and I do feel like that you have the citizens that want to move here for that reason. So I thank you very much.
Mary, thank you.
Mayor, the remainder of the forms are people who do not wish to speak but want to register their support. So I'll go through the forms and their names and address. Kathleen Harris, 1432 Mountain Trail in Keller. Virginia Carroll and Terry Carroll, residing at 3321 Manchester Circle in Bedford, Texas. Bill and Helen Wishard, P.O. Box 820643 in North Richland Hills. Lynn Hipp and Michael Hipp at 8612 Amherst Court. They all are speaking and want to register their support.
Council, we also have 6 more that came in late today. 5 were for, 1's opposed. And then we just received another one from John Litz. It's on your email, and it's opposed. Pardon? There was 5 for, 1 opposed, and then John Litz is opposed. 2 opposed. And that's from the public hearing. Before I close the public hearing, is there anyone else would like to speak? Please come forward. If you would, sir, please state your name and address for the record. Yeah.
Name's Angelo Puma, property address 8624 Clara Drive, North Richland Hills, 76182.
And your name again, sir?
Angelo Puma.
Angelo, we've got your letter, too.
So I did send the council a letter. I appreciate you guys taking the opportunity to hear us tonight. I'd like to start by telling you that I'm not opposed to the idea of the senior cooperative. I am opposed to a 3.5-story building looking down on my property. I would ask that you guys take a closer look at the numbers that have been presented, because what was presented tonight on the slide and what was presented previously do not match up. So in terms of a finished floor height, I know on the slide that was just presented, it said 30 feet, to where we were told that 30 feet was the top floor. They said 30 feet was the roof line, and then it went up from there to 45-ish, I think, on the slide, to where we were told that that would be a 55 or 60-foot height. So I'd make sure that you guys take a close look at that. I did provide pictures. I hired an aerial photographer to come out to take a look at the site. He took photography shooting back to our residents so that you guys can get a clear perspective. I think looking at these computer-generated sight lines, it's a little bit difficult to understand the true impact that a tall building like this would have on a residence. So I think you can see in your packet that I provided to you the photos that were provided showing exactly how high the drone photography was taken, where it was looking back to, so that you guys can get a true perspective of what it's going to look like. Again, I'm not opposed to a community like this or a cooperative community. I think the developers have done a fantastic job. They've reached out to us and tried to address all the concerns they could. But I do know that at the meeting about a year ago, the council was very concerned with the Thornbridge neighbors. They were very concerned about the site into their property. And so my ask this evening is for you guys to also be concerned with us, because it is a 3.5-story building. Starts at 4 feet above grade from what we were told with the parking garage, and will be 3 floors above that. And so we just ask for the same support that you guys gave our residents in Thornbridge.
Okay. Andrew, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Would anybody else like to speak? Please come forward, sir. State your name and address for the record.
Hi, Council. Thank you. My name is Alex Segretti. I live at 8349 Saddlebrook Drive in North Richland Hills, Texas. I think one thing that hasn't been given enough attention is the parking and then the pedestrian access into Saddlebrook Estates. So currently, with the 83 total spots, that's 61% of the requirement. I'm very concerned that our neighborhood is going to become the overflow of that. For birthday parties, for holidays. Not only will Angelo's house, that citizens that live there can look into his house, he'll then also not be able to have family over and park right outside their house because of that. I think that is also that it'll increase the potential of the crime. Currently, we only do have one access point into our house, into our neighborhood. That makes it very difficult for crime to come in. I don't want packages getting stolen off of our property. I don't want packages getting like they have been in Forest Glen or in Thornbridge. The 1.5 parking spots I think is just way too less. We live in Texas. We don't have the normal public transportation as everybody else does. So while many people only have one car, we're still a two-car state. We're still a two-car city. My parents live in Thornbridge. Granted, they're the outcasts. They have 6 cars. Now, they have multiple classics, but you see it. Most people do still have 2, if not 3 cars at that age with maybe a play car to play around with. So while they think only 9 to 13 spots of the 23 exterior will be used, because we are still a city with not the public transportation that we have, I do think that there's going to be a lot more parking that's used up that will overflow into ours. That access point really would be for mainly the benefit of the community. We have a great sidewalk that goes up to North Tarrant Parkway. Again, I think it's probably about a 5 feet sidewalk. You may know North Tarrant. Yeah, so 5 feet wide. If you're walking to that shopping center, you're going to Gentry Coffee, you're going to Airborne, you're going up to the northwest part of that part. So to walk through into Village Co-op and then around, it's just going to be too long. So again, I feel like that's mainly for the citizens of the Village Co-op and mainly for their overflow. And I just want to highlight Angela's concerns with the privacy. We all built there. I know at the time when we moved in, just like everybody else, nothing's guaranteed to be, to be the single family homes. I do just question, is this the right spot for this development? I think it is a great idea, but there's plenty of other different areas where you wouldn't have the privacy concerns, such as where we are now. I do play softball at Northfield Park as well. One thing we're missing from there, and that we always talk about on my teams, is we don't have a place to go to like hang out after the games. There are no restaurants and bars close by to go and finish the Ranger game at night, or go watch Monday Night Football or the Thursday night game right after softball that like other places like Softball World down in Euless have with Fuzzies. I think this is a great place for something like that. You would not only continue to have the residents come to play softball, but you would also then give them the place to go after the game and collaborate and hang out, as well as single families, as well as families such as mine with 2 kids to go and watch Saturday football. Thank you guys for the time.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. If anybody else would like to speak in favor or opposition, please come forward. Council, I'm going to close the public hearing, and before I entertain a motion, are there any clarifying questions or requests for additional information from either the staff or the applicant? Council, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move for approval of item ZC 2020-01, ordinance number 3698, as presented, but also with the motion to include berms just inside the west side screening wall, and no balconies on the west wall of the building that are oriented to the west.
But the four spots that are facing north and south are okay?
Yes.
Okay. We've got a motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
I've got a motion from Councilman Turnage, a second from Councilman Rodriguez. Before I ask for discussion, Clayton, did we cover everything that we needed to in the motion?
Sorry, did you cover the berm?
Yes.
Okay, then I believe you did.
Okay.
The balconies and the berm.
Yep, we got both.
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, that is CZ 2021-01, right? Ordinance 369.
Yeah, it's item C1, ZZ 2021-01, ordinance number 3698. Discussion. Council, I'm a little concerned with the development of the adjacent property. I'm a little concerned with the access, not off of Davis or not into Davis, but once they get in there. I think if it's something like we're seeing on mid-cities, where they turn into kind of office, commercial small offices, it makes sense. The gentleman that talked about the restaurants, This is not a spot for those restaurants. However, we have plenty of spots up on North Tarrant and Davis for those, and he's right on point. We don't have those restaurants, and we're not going to have those restaurants until we have people to go into them. A developer's not going to come in here and put a restaurant that's going to stay empty. And we've seen that time and time again of a restaurant coming in, and the people need to be there. These kind of cooperatives need to be there to be able to not only support these places after in the evening, but these folks that just came up and talked to us, they're the lunch crowd. They're the early evening and the lunch crowd. They'll go have breakfast and then catch a 2 o'clock lunch, and you won't see them again till the next morning breakfast, or they'll come in early dinner. And I think that's what we're looking for from a development standpoint, is people that'll come in during the day to fill, whether it's a Sonic or the Whataburger or Starwoods, and Starwoods is already too busy to get into, but those type locations. I understand the concern from the residents on Saddlebrook and Bridle Path Lane. Now, all of y'all have lived here a long time. Patrick, you grew up here, and y'all will remember that the reason these streets were named that was there was an old horse arena back. You'd catch a dirt road off of, when y'all said y'all lived here when before North Tarrant Parkway, when it was a little one asphalt road, there was no Walmart, you'd come in that way, and there was an old horse arena back in there. And that's why they named these streets after that horse arena. But all that area, it's grown, and we've got to think about all our residents. I take to heart the folks that live on that street, but I also like the development and the trees and everything we're planting to protect that neighborhood. That's a good neighborhood. I ride my bike through it pretty regularly, and I ride down and just turn around and go back up. And we made a mistake on the development there by Kindred. Those are 4-foot sidewalks around there, which is hard to ride or walk on. But putting a 5-foot sidewalk gives you that room to be able to do it. And it connects with that gate passage going up Saddlebrook. Then you can go in the back way and come in the Tommy and Sue Brown Park and catch the Barfield trails, and you've got access to 32 miles of trails. These are the folks you'll see walking those trails early in the morning or early in the afternoon. I think it's a good product, and I'm looking forward to the developer doing what he said in that development. I've got some comments. Rita?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to address something that one of the residents had talked about with the addition across the street that we had looked at about a year ago. And I want them to realize that the reason we turned the development down across the street by Thornbridge is because it was a 4-story building, if I remember correctly, and it was already going to be built up on elevation. That would be another story. So it was, by the time it would be completed, it was almost 5 stories. That's a lot different from 3. And I understand your concerns about you don't want people looking in your backyard. I wouldn't want people looking in my backyard either. But the alternative to this could be a big box store or a big business that has more traffic and trash, and this is going to be a nice development. And we heard from several residents that this is something that is needed in our community. It's diversity of housing. I want this to stay 55 and above, and Shane, I hope that you have rules and regulations. I know that grandkids might be moving in now and then, or a kid moving in, but I don't want to turn into an apartment complex. We already have that. We want senior living place for our seniors that have amenities and things to do and socialization and getting out, and this is going to fit that. So I understand the residents' concerns about more traffic and the lighting, I don't think is an issue, but looking in backyards, but this was zoned retail commercial. There could be a lot worse coming in. At least we have control of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Susie?
I think it was one of our people mentioned it. We need these kinds of areas for, well, all of us except for, I think, 2 are in the category of having a viable living option. Yeah, we have, and it does provide that option for people who want to still live in the area, live close to their families, but don't want to have to take care of the yard and don't want to have to. 55 units is, there's like maybe maximum 110 people. No, let's see. There's 6 one-bedrooms, so they could have 2 in there. So maybe that's not a whole lot of people. And that's certainly not a whole lot of cars, and some of them may not have any cars, but most will have 1, maybe 2. So it's going to be quiet, and as the mayor pointed out, the increase in lunch crowd could be beneficial to us in bringing some other restaurants to our neighborhood because we have to fill the afternoons, not just the evening crowd. And so that does have some benefits, I believe, for us. I also like the drive that's all the way around the building, and for one big important reason, I think it's a huge safety thing. I think it's going to provide for good safety for the residents because, you know, as I get older, I don't want to have to worry about my safety. And if it means down the road I get to move into a place like this, that's going to be a comfort to me, and still be able to live and do the things that I want to do because, you know, we're living longer. I mean, it's just the way it is out there. And baby boomers, you know, we're going to be around for a lot more years. So I think this is a good use of the land. It's not the whole piece of property. It provides a buffer for commercial use to a residential area, which your multi-living buildings complexes provide for. They are a buffer between the residential and the commercial. So I think it's really good. And it's not, I've heard some people talk about it being a facility. It's not a facility, it's a complex. It's a living complex, a place for people to live and have a good time and work and play and do whatever it is they need to do. So thank you.
Thank you, Susie. Mason?
Yeah, I just want to say generally, you know, as we continue as a city to get closer and closer to full build out, there's no perfect developable properties left in the city. And so I think I want to say it's a credit to the developers and the credit to our staff to spend the time to get something that works in one of these. There's a lot of boxes. We ask, you know, on these few undeveloped pieces left, we ask folks to thread a very thin needle to get something that works with the existing communities around it, and to kind of fit a square peg in a round hole. And so, like I said, I think Rita mentioned earlier that this is kind of the second time through, but I think the development is better for it, for us to spend our time working through it and working through the details with our staff. And so I just appreciate everybody's work on this, and I think, like I said, a lot of hard work goes into making these, you know, imperfect pieces of property work. So, thank you.
With those comments, I'm going to call for the question. Council, please vote. And the motion passes. Shane, you've got some work to do pretty quick because there's a whole bunch of people ready to move in. Thank y'all for joining us.